YouTube. Alright, so we got a couple cutting jobs ahead of us. Let's make sure this is all rocking and rolling. Okay. So yeah, I gotta go to Ponca City in a couple days. Looking forward to it. I gotta cut like 50 walnut logs, 50 plus. There's also other species of logs that I need to cut there. It'll just be depending upon how far we get. You know, I'm gonna go out there for a few days. So looking forward to that. You know, going to Ponca City, cutting a bunch of logs. I recently just made a wood miser order. So 4 or 5 days ago, I called Wood Miser and I ordered a new drive belt, a new up and down belt, power feed belt. I got 4 additional B57 belts. The B57 belts go on the the wheel, the sawmills, and throughout time you need to replace those. So any belt that's on this machine, it's in this bag right here. So I do desire to have a slimmer case. However that looks, so I want to have a case so I can put these belts in, and I'm also going to probably next time I have an order, I'll order a couple more B57 belts just so I always have those on hand. So I've got quite a bit of blades on hand. I do need to order a few more blades, just so I can have a bunch of blades. So like behind you, I keep them coiled up. If you follow me on Instagram, you can see my stories, how I store my blades and stuff like that. So that's kind of like the primary content, my daily life. You'll see a story on Instagram, and that's kind of like the situation. But anyways, there's 50,000 followers over on Instagram. If you want to, come check me out over there. So that's kind of cool. But anyways, this is kind of all I do. I just locked down another job for this week. So I talk to many people all the time, and they want me to cut their logs. So sometimes whenever we talk, it takes a few weeks, a few months, sometimes even over a year before I come out to their property. So, and that's completely fine with me, So I have cut for over 241 people in the state of Oklahoma. It's been a pleasure cutting for the amount of people that I've cut for. It's extremely rewarding, lots of labor, and I'm kind of dialed in. Like, my process is dialed in. If you call me, we're gonna have a conversation. You're gonna tell me about your desires. Let's say your desires are like, hey, I'm really wanting to get these logs cut that know my property. I haven't been able to find anybody that can come out to cut my logs, and blah 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 blah. Reached out to me and said that you cut for him, and I kind of want to just talk to you and see what the situation is. I'll be like, well, how many logs do you have? And then what type of logs are these? Do you have the ability to move these logs, or do you need me to do all that? Do you have a flat piece of ground on your property for me to set up on? And blah 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 blah. Ask some questions. They send me their first and last name and their address. I can immediately kind of figure out what the setup fee is, and then they already know it's $150 an hour, and I can kind of give them an idea of what's going to take to get the job done. So once they give me the green light, I put them on the schedule, and then I go out and I kind of achieve those goals, and then I come back home. So before I come back home, every single time, I clean this sawmill. So there's times I'm cutting pine. So whenever I cut pine logs with this, I use a diesel drip. So instead of water in my reservoir, there's going to be diesel, and it's going to be dripping on the blade, because there's a lot of sap and a lot of just buildup of whatever it is, sap and just residue. And the diesel keeps your blade nice and clean. It keeps your belts nice and clean, and all the sawdust is just being thrown out. So that's what I do. And whenever I do use diesel, it's like this thing will stink of diesel. It's a fire hazard to me, so it's like I'm obviously going to wash it. Well, if you think about it, the majority of the times whenever I cut customers' logs, they're going to have insects in them. So whenever I come and cut customers' logs, majority of the time those logs have been on the ground for 6 months, maybe a year. So there's going to be all sorts of insects in those logs. Well, those insects are all over my machine whenever I cut those logs. I just, by choice, it's like protocol. Anytime I cut logs, I clean my machine, I grease it up, I oil it up, I get it ready to go for the next job. So after I cut logs, I'm always going to clean this machine. I dry it off. I take my blower and just blow it all off. I do like to throw some more oil, and I use that let's say transmission fluid. It's Dexcon. You get it from AutoZone. It's like $8. It's a red fluid. That's what I use on majority of everything. There are a lot of grease certs throughout the machine. There's a grease cert again on this. But anyway, so this is a 7-degree blade. Whenever I throw a 7-degree blade on this wood miser, it's probably going to be because I'm cutting pecan. So whenever I cut pecan with the 10-degree blade, I have a few dozen 10-degree blades. When you cut pecan with 10-degree blades, you might get a few nice cuts, but it's not the best cut. And what I've found over the years, I have been cutting wood for over a decade. This is my second wood miser. I also have a Lucas mill that cuts 76 inches wide. So what I have found is the 7-degree blade cuts pecan really well. So I've had a challenge with pecan in the past, and it's been frustrating. You mess up a couple cuts of a customer's logs. You have a couple not so good cuts. I'm unhappy at that point. And I'd say 4 or 5 months ago, once that order just had a batch of them, I haven't had a problem with any issues with the blade. So I've been really happy to have the 10-degree and the 7-degree on hand, so I can perform those flat cuts. Any log in the state of Oklahoma that you need cut, you reach out to me, 405-562-0707. I come onto your property, I cut your logs. It's going to cost you $150 an hour. There's a setup fee. The setup fee is going to be based off your location. Just based, that the setup fee is going to be at least $200. Okay, hourly rate is going to be $150. This is one thing that I have changed recently. Like I said, I've cut for hundreds of people. And I have been cutting wood for 10 plus years, let's say 13. And I would actually say 17 or 18 if you just talked about chainsaw. This is what I'll say is, there's times where customers' properties are flat and you can set this machine up in 5-10 minutes. And after this machine's set up, that's when the time starts. If your property has no flat ground and I have to move the earth to make this sawmill set up right to process the logs that you desire to get cut, time's going to start when I get to your property. And the reason that is because I just experienced it the other day, and this is with a guy, a friend. This is with a friend, my buddy Ben. I've cut with him, in the halves. I've cut with him. I've cut for him, many times. I've cut for hundreds of people. But Ben, I love cutting with Ben. This location that he wanted to harvest logs on, great. I know landowner, great people. I've harvested logs out there, the great situation. The only problem is that they're just hills. There's no flat ground anywhere. It took me an hour and a half to get this sawmill set up. When I came to property, I told him, I can get this job done, but I want the time to start at 9:30. And that's whenever I got there. Because I told him, this is going to take like an hour plus just to get my mill set up. I was expecting to be able to just pull up on flat ground, mill some logs. They wanted me to pull up in the forest. There's trees all over the place, their logs are all scattered, not organized, and it would have probably taken even longer if I would have pulled up in that little, patch of forest before they had their logs maneuvered. So I just really whenever I look at a logging site or a harvest site or whatever you want to call it, I'm instantly trying to formulate a plan, because I like to formulate a plan and then execute. I knew that we weren't going to be able to cut with what's going on then. I was expecting all logs lined up, ready for me to just roll up and, drop sawmill and go. But that's not the case. So typically, time starts when the sawmill is ready. That usually takes me 10 to 15 minutes. If your location has anything that's going to cause me to take extra time to get this sawmill set up, the time's going to start when I come to your property. So that's just the only thing I have to start implementing. I can't just be like, oh, I'll deal with it, blah, blah. Customer says it was flat, but, it's not flat, and there's issues, and I have to, move earth so my loading arms can be proper and certain things can be proper. If I have to move earth and work a few hours just to get this sawmill proper to cut your logs, you're going to pay for that time. So typically, like I said, sorry for rambling, time starts whenever the sawmill, gets set up. But if you have challenging land that's going to cause me to, spend additional time, time's going to start whenever I get to your property. I'll come anywhere in the state of Oklahoma. I love traveling. I've been all over Oklahoma. Before I started my business, so I've been working myself for over 15 years. Before I did the, my own situation, I used to do heating and air for 4 or 5 years. And all 3 neighbors are here, they're great people. I used to do heating and air for over 5 years, and it was a great situation. But we traveled the entire state, so just seeing the country and being in different areas. Other than Edmond, Oklahoma, this is where I'm located. My house is less than a quarter of a mile away from here. I do have a GPS on this sawmill, so I kind of know where it's at all times. And then I also can get here in 5 minutes. So yeah, I do. Security is very important to me. I like to make sure my equipment's safe. This sawmill actually is going to start living at my house, and that's going to happen sooner than later. My desire is to build a structure at my house. We'll be living there for quite some time. I have 2 kids, and then I have a 3rd kid on the way. So I desire to build something that this can live under at my house. And the reason that I want to do that is because there's lots of time that I spend at this unit. This unit costs me $350 a month. I don't mind spending $350 a month on this unit. I absolutely think it's fantastic because that's kind of like my only overhead. I've always, kind of purchased my sawmills in cash, and then you have to store it. So I've always been in a storage unit. I've always stored my sawmill in a storage unit. I want to eliminate that this year, and I have the space to do it. I don't have lots of space. I don't have acres of land. But I do have the space to store this sawmill and my trailer at my house right now. I have a 10-foot gate in place. It's going to require me to cut down. I have a walnut tree I planted 6 or 7 years ago, and this walnut tree is like this. It's going to require me to cut that tree down, unfortunately, and it's going to require me to cut the Bradford tree down. I have a Bradford pear tree that I do desire to cut down because it's an invasive species, but I haven't cut it down yet because it provides an ample amount of shade to me in my house. It's really nice to have this shade cover at certain times during the day because of this big old tree that we already have established. I took out a huge poplar tree 4 or 5 years ago. I paid my buddy Ben, he had $400 to drop this tree down. He's a great guy, R&D tree. I can have a crane anywhere in Oklahoma come pick up a log and put it on my trailer if I desire to have it happen. I've done it before. Actually, I've done it a few times. It's a costly situation, so the amount of assets that I have at my disposal is pretty intense. Like I said in past videos, my sawmill isn't like a typical sawmill. My sawmill I would consider like a micro sawmill. Let's make sure I don't get disrupted. Okay. Yeah, so whenever I say my sawmill is a micro sawmill, I'm going to reference 99% of sawmills. If you go to a sawmill anywhere in the country, you're going to see logs laying on the ground, okay? Well, that's their inventory. They desire to cut that inventory at one point in time. You're gonna see equipment on that particular property, and you're also gonna see multiple people. Well, it's just a one-man show. I've been a one-man show for over 15 years. I did used to have 3 different employees with the Home Improvement Repair LLC, before this business, was established, and kind of, trumped that business by choice, not by, business-minded sense, because my last business used to make more money than this business, so it was just because of the desire and love for wood why I chose to stop remodeling houses in 2017 and go 100% wood. And then that's, 2017 is when I bought my first sawmill. My first sawmill was a gasoline engine. I sold it in 2020, bought this machine for $41,000. It would now cost $60,000. So anyway, so that's kind of the gist of the sawmill. It did take over I love remodeling houses. I'm actually going to reestablish that service-based company probably at the later end of the year. The reason I desire to establish a service-based company once again, it's going to be named completely different. It's going to be run completely different than I've ever ran a company. I don't necessarily spend money to bring people to come to me. People just come to me. Like whenever I remodel houses, people desire for me to remodel their bathroom, remodel their kitchen, remodel their entire house. As far as expanding on, they want extra rooms in their house, so pouring stem walls and doing the HVAC, the electrical, doing new framing and new brickwork and slabs and stuff like that. Done those things. So I desire to have an additional business outside of my wood business. It's going to be a strictly service-based industry. There's over 5,000 contacts on the phone that I'm looking at right now. These are contacts that have been saved. I have people that contact me often, wanting services performed, and these are services that are, you can go into these houses and do these punch list items and get out of the house, make customer happy. They know they trust you because you've established this relationship. You've known them for 15 years, 10 years, 7 or 8 years. They desire for you to do these services for them. So you do that on the side. And you just continue to do this. This is a tool in my tool bag. People reach out to me and they need me to cut their logs. I'm cutting wood for somebody on Wednesday, and they actually reached out to me 7 or 8 months ago. Yeah, we've been procrastinating, and we finally want you to come out to get the logs. Well, guess what? 7 or 8 months ago, my prices were actually at $100 an hour to cut wood. And my prices were at $100 an hour to cut wood for over seven or so years. $100 an hour. I raised my prices a few months ago, $150 an hour. They didn't question it. They don't have any problem with me having to charge $150 an hour to perform their task. I said it's going to take a few hours to cut the logs. The husband, said, I don't care if it takes 6 hours to cut your logs. So I do think that they're not going to help with the logistics or the procurement or processing of their logs. So I will try to be efficient. I'll hustle. I'll work the best I can, but I'm not going to be running to, take a slab off my sawmill, running to their pile and setting, it's probably going to take maybe 3 to 4 hours to get this job done. So if they desire to get this job done in 2 hours, the husband would be there and they would be off bearing all the material off my sawmill, so I don't have to do it, and I can just focus on cutting the next cut. Well, guess what? I'm going to do the entire workload. I would love to do the entire workload because I'm going to get paid 2 times the amount of money to perform the task at hand to, cut a few logs versus them, kind of being efficient. They get the best bang for the buck. If you want the best bang for your buck for me to come to your property, you're going to never let me touch a piece of wood after I cut it. And you're going to allow me to cut the next piece of wood. So that's how you get the most bang for your buck. There's 4 or 5 different operations in the state of Oklahoma that I cut for. I've cut for over 14 or 15 different people in the state of Oklahoma that actually have a sawmill. The reason they reach out to me to cut their logs is because they know that I can mow down logs. This is all I do. I cut logs. I've been cutting logs for over a decade. So they reach out to me. I'm not trying to be prideful, boastful, or anything. I will say I love the Lord, and I try to be honest, truthful. I like to be punctual. I like to communicate the best I can. But I will say, I feel like I have my process dialed. I know how to take your logs, cut them up, slice them up. You have stacks of wood, lumber, whatever you want, timber, and I leave. They pay me. They're extremely happy. And I love doing this. I absolutely love cutting logs. So if you have logs in the state of Oklahoma, let me cut them. Let's talk about the sawmill a little bit. So what happens whenever I bring this sawmill out and I'm in front of 40 or 50 logs and my drive belt goes out, and you don't have an extra drive belt, you have to leave location, come back home, figure out what's going on, fix the issue, come back. Well, that would take 2x the resources to complete the job. So I feel like for the past 4 or 5 years, I've always tried to be prepared. So like anything can happen. There's times where this sawmill goes out, it can't come back home until something is welded, because something breaks. And those are the things you have to be prepared for to do. Like I'm not a welder. I'll be 100% honest. When it comes to engines and when it comes to welding metal, I don't have much experience in it, and I'm willing to pay to get those services done for me. And it's great because I have 4 or 5 different welders in my phone right now. If I needed something welded on this machine, I guarantee you I could have something welded on this machine in the next hour and a half. Assuming it wasn't 11 o'clock at night, I wouldn't have had this problem at 11 o'clock at night. This would have came up 4 or 5 hours ago. I would have reached out to my asset. They would have been like, yeah, hey, bring your sawmill over. I would love to do it. And anytime I weld on this sawmill, I'm going to disconnect the battery cable. You have to disconnect the battery cable if you weld on this sawmill. The reason is because if you arc and fry a computer system or any of the electrical components on this sawmill, you're toast. You're going to have lots of troubleshooting and lots of situations that you're going to have to deal with before this sawmill is up in order. So this isn't based off, learning the hard way. I've never welded on this machine or my past Woodmiser without disconnecting both battery terminals. It's extremely important. So you have to be fully prepared for something to go wrong when you bring this machine out. Let's get something in the tool bag right here. So I got 2 of these. So this is what I'm lacking currently before I do my own procurement. I do have 3 different chainsaws, so I know I'll be able to finish the job if I did go out. I am going to be going on an adventure, so I have desires to go somewhere, and I'm going to be cutting down a few trees, and these trees are large walnut trees. So I'm going to go out there, cut them down properly. I'll have a helmet on, chaps. I have flown thousands of different trees, so I do like to be extremely safe. At one point in time, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, I would consider myself maybe a cowboy, kind of like reckless. And I did a few things when it comes to taking down trees that probably shouldn't have been done, and I got extremely lucky, or whatever you want to call it. So climbing up into trees with no harnesses, taking down big wood, I just find it, I'm 35 years old, I would rather pay somebody to climb up in a tree before I get into a tree ever again. I have no desires to get into a tree with a chainsaw. So that's when my buddy Clayton comes in. So this guy is a savage. He can cut any tree in America. So literally, he has chased hurricanes for many years with some big companies in Oklahoma, and they chased hurricanes. So let's say there's a disaster that happens. Well, these guys will come on site with their cranes, skidsters. They even have tiger cats and stuff like that. A tiger cat can come in and clear your property very quickly. You come in and hire a person that has a skidster and a forestry mulcher to do your land. Well, I would hire a tiger cat, because this machine is meant to eat forests. So anyway, so like he has lots of experience to cut down hazardous trees. So any hazard you've seen in a tree, he's actually like kind of considered like the safety guy when it comes to anytime he comes on to other businesses hire him, okay? Because he can climb trees and he's very good with rigging trees out. He's good with crane work and all those different things. So whenever I bring this individual out, I'm pretty confident and I trust this individual to achieve the goals that I want him to achieve. So if you come into the forest and you have a 30 or 40 inch wide walnut tree, and this tree has a pretty large canopy, let's say there's just a massive canopy in there, most people would just drop the tree because they want the tree, and they don't care about any of the collateral damage that's going to happen in that forest. Well, I have 100% like different tactics. Like I care about the surrounding forest, so that particular tree needs to be completely dissected. That's going to involve somebody climbing up the tree. They will spike it. There's no reason not to spike the tree. They have their spurs or whatever. I have a pair right there. He'll climb up the tree. He'll de-limb the tree. He'll drop all these branches down. So whenever this tree falls, this tree's not going to mess up a bunch of trees in the forest. And these landowners that I work for and have access, I have access to over 10,000 acres in the state. They like that, okay? They've actually had experience with other outfitters that come onto the property and make a total mess on the property and just leave. They just take the stems, okay? Whenever they see that I'm sometimes taking an entire day just for one tree, like whenever I go out, it's happened hundreds of times. Whenever I go out with this machine and go cut trees down, sometimes I'm only cutting a tree or two a day because every single piece of wood from that tree, I'm the branch manager, okay? So I have to manage every branch on that tree and I have to dispose of it. This disposal isn't just going to be left at that particular falling site. You can't just leave trees in people's fields. You have to dispose of this wood in a certain ravine. A lot of these properties that I have access to, landowners have ravines, and they actually desire for you to throw limbs in these ravines. That's what they desire to do. So, that's what needs to happen. Whenever you cut the tree down, you need to clean up your mess. You just can't leave all this complete mess. Let's say before you got there, take a picture of it, and then take a picture of it when you left. Well, does it look better than when you came, or does it look like you just extracted a tree and left a total mess? So I like to clean up my mess, make sure I respect the landowner's wishes. That's the reason why I have access to this land, because they know I'm going to respect their property. They know I'm not going to come onto their property and cut 100 trees down in a few days and come in there with tiger cats and multiple skidsters and multiple front end loaders and a few different logging trucks and extract all their stems. They know that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen with me. We're not going to come into forest and take all your trees. We want to selective harvest all properties. So there's many trees on properties that I have probably 200 or 300 different walnut trees that I could go cut tomorrow. But there's probably only 100 of them that show signs of decline, that show signs that they actually needed to be harvested. I could go cut a bunch of 20-inch wide, walnut trees down tomorrow that are extremely healthy. But what does that look like in the future if you just cut these trees down that aren't ready to be cut down? Are you going to have 35-inch wide walnut trees in 20 years? If tree companies and logging companies from out of state are coming into our land, cutting 12 and 14 and 16 and 18-inch wide walnut trees down, taking all of them on the property, extracting them, they go to Missouri, they go into containers, and they're shipped to China. Well, that's great, it's a free market. Well, I think we should just look at forests and the assets that we have and kind of manage them properly. And I think a selective harvest is a more sustainable path than cut every single walnut tree on the property. You need to leave seed trees on properties so you continue to have that walnut seed so the squirrels can replant forest. And I will say, majority of the time, if you looked at logging as a whole, the East Coast and the West Coast, there's lots of reforest, replanting efforts going on. But when it comes to the hardwood tree, most people don't replant the forest whenever they cut trees. I will say the forests do regenerate themselves. There can be some invasives that overtake a certain area in the sunlight, and those natives can't thrive. So I think that actively replanting the forests that we cut in the Midwest should be like standard versus just cutting the trees that you desire to want to cut and taking them and trying to find the next piece of property. So I just have a kind of more of a sustainable footprint. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned I consider myself a micro sawmill. If you go to any sawmill in the country, you're going to see logs laying on the ground. As I said, I manage over 10,000 acres in the state, so all my inventory is standing right now. My inventory is actively growing right now, or it's actively dying right now. And the third option could be I'm actively losing board footage in the forest by not cutting all the trees that are like past due. There are many times whenever I've cut over 10,000 different trees. Anyway, so there's times whenever you cut trees down, you cut it at the stem. I'm gonna face cut, plunge cut, or bore cut, form a proper hinge, leave a back strap, leave my trigger, and I'm gonna cut that trigger. Those trees fall, where I tell them to fall. And the reason I do that is because most people, they're gonna put their face cut in there. They're gonna come in from the back side. They're gonna be, halfway cut, or not even halfway cut. That log or tree is gonna start moving a little bit. Well, guess what? That movement in that log, in that large stem, is actually gonna create cracks in the log you desire to slice up on your sawmill. So I don't like trees to move until I tell them to move. So the face cut, the bore cut or plunge cut, proper hinge, leaving a trigger, cutting the trigger, has been my go-to method for the past 5 years. I'm not going to stray away from it. I don't even care if the tree is completely straight up, all balanced limbs, it's completely proper. There's certain times where you don't need to use a plunge cut. I will say that. But anyway, so I do like to make sure whenever I fall trees, they're falling properly, and those trees aren't moving before I want them to move, and I don't want any cracks that are going to be caused. Because I'm following trees improperly, so that's very important to me. Last thing I want to mention is the chainsaws. You need to be prepared for the chainsaws. Just happened the other day, so I don't know if it was this one or the other one. I have two of them just like this. So sprocket broke. Well, let's say you're in the woods. Let's say you're halfway. There's been a time I've halfway through the tree. I only brought one chainsaw at the time. That was like 6 or 7 years ago, and my chainsaw broke. Tree's halfway cut. Job's not finished. I bought a new chainsaw that day. You have to finish the job. You can't do that. Anyway, so anytime I go cut trees, I'm gonna have at least 2 chainsaws. I'm pretty confident that they're ready to go to finish the job. So the sprocket broke on this chainsaw. Whenever the sprocket breaks on a chainsaw, it's going to cause it. You won't be able to use it anymore. So I always have sprockets in the truck. I don't have many. I don't have an extra one right now. Sprocket broke. I had an extra one in the truck. Fixed the chainsaw. Back up and running. I did have an additional 2 chainsaws I could have grabbed, but my rule is if I can fix the chainsaw, I never want to grab another chainsaw that's like primed and ready to go. One of these chainsaws is like ready to eat wood, okay? And I didn't want to grab it because if I can fix this, I want to fix it. So having the extra parts on hand when it comes to the wood miser or the chainsaw is extremely important. I just like to, if you have a job, I like to, complete the job. I don't want to go home like, oh, I couldn't finish the job because, this, that, and that. It's like, if you're prepared properly, you could have alleviated those situations. So anyways, put a new sawmill job on the books today. I got to cut in on Wednesday. Pretty excited about that. And then I got to go to Ponca City, cut 40 or 50 different walnut logs. That's kind of the ramble. I've been wanting to make videos at least once a week or maybe every other week on a weekend. Just talking about sawmill talk and just the business. So small business, lots of dry wood. I sell like a few pieces of wood a week. I don't necessarily try to push all my wood out. Like I have no desires to sell all this wood in here. If I sold all this wood in here, I'm not at a particular point where I have the replacement for all this wood. The majority of the wood you see in here is going to be dry, seasoned, ready to go. I've had this piece for over 2 years. It's like dry wood. I don't have much dry wood outside of this particular unit that's ready to go. So I don't focus my efforts and my dollars and my mortgage payments not getting paid by selling wood. It's getting paid by this machine cutting logs for people. So that's what I really love doing, is just cutting logs. So if you have any logs in the state of Oklahoma, I would love to cut your logs. This is all I do. I love cutting logs. It all starts with a conversation. You need to call me 405-562-0707 or text me. I would suggest, if there's right now, text me hey, I'm blah blah blah. I live in Ardmore and I have this acreage and I have 1,000 acres and we just cut down 40 or 50 different pecan trees or cedar trees or cypress trees or whatever the trees are, and we really have been trying to find somebody to cut these logs. And we found you, and we heard about you. You cut for Brad down the street, and it's we want you to cut these logs. And we have a conversation. You tell me about your desires and goals. I tell you my perspective. I tell you how we're going to achieve these goals. You give me the green light. I put it on my schedule. Well, first I talk to my wife. She tells me when I can put it on my schedule, and then I make it happen. I come to your property. I cut your logs. And you pay me, you're happy, I answer any of the questions that you might have with, after I leave, you need to sticker your wood, you need to make sure your sticker's on the very end, you might want to seal your wood, you might want to paint your wood, you might even want to strap your wood down, you make sure it's on a level foundation. Are you going to put a roof on it since it's just sitting out there? Are you going to do anything with the bugs that are currently present in this wood, because there are bugs in your logs, and these bugs will can destroy your wood if you don't deal with them. So do you have plans to spend $2, $3, $4 a board foot to put these in a kiln? Are you planning on treating this with some type of chemical? So I just like to be honest with people. Bugs are highly present in logs, especially in logs that have been laying on the ground. I will say my logs don't sleep on the ground for a day. Whenever I cut trees down, they're sliced up within a few hours. So that's kind of the difference between my sawmill business and most people's sawmill businesses. Their inventory is laying on the ground right now, or currently about to come to their mill. My inventory is just standing up, and it's just kind of a really small business. So that's what I like about it. I have no desires to grow. I don't want people that want to come in here with semi trucks and have to fulfill these pressured orders $20,000 or $30,000 of the walnut. I'm not the guy to make that happen, because it wouldn't fulfill me. I love what I do. So changing a few things to grow doesn't make sense to me. The growth in my business is going to come from whenever I sell my house and buy my dream property. My dream property is going to be a custom built house. It's going to be on multiple acres. There's going to be a shop. There's going to be a swimming pool. There's going to be ponds. I'm going to have a skid steer. I could purchase a few skid steers right now. If I wanted to right now, I could purchase a few skid steers right now in cash. Where am I going to put that skid steer? How are you going to use this skid steer to increase your inventory when you're limited on space at your house here? So it just doesn't necessarily make sense. One day I will sell my house, we'll sell our house, we'll get a bigger property, we'll have the space so I can achieve the goals that I want to achieve. There's many times where customers want to bring me logs right now. They have logs on their trailer and they want to bring them to me right now. Well, I can't help you because I can't receive logs at this location. I'm 100% portable. The kind of my business model is like, let's say you spend however many hours to put your logs on your, trailer, and you drop them off on a sawmill. You drop them off to a sawmill. You have to drive. You gotta come pick them up. You gotta do that. I literally want to bring my sawmill to your logs, cut them up where your logs are at. You get them cut however you desire for them to be cut, and then that's what I want. And if it can't happen like that, I can't cut your logs. If you want to bring me your logs, it's not happening. Like, I'm not gonna set up in my driveway and fill up 10 green trash canisters full of sawdust. It's just not happening. This sawmill is meant to come to your property to alleviate the headache transporting your logs to a sawmill. You get to cut these logs on your property, how you want them to be cut, when you want them to be cut. You schedule it, and it's a fun day. You can learn a lot about the machine. You can learn a lot about the process. You can be hands-on. There's times whenever I'm rotating, positioning these logs, you tell me, actually, I want to rotate this entire cant this way because I like this grain better. You can do that if you're, around the sawmill whenever I'm cutting your material. So there's lots of things that go behind the sawmill. Sometimes my wife doesn't even understand it all. Like, I would desire to bring her out on a job one day, but it's just the sawmill. That's wood. She doesn't like desire to like she has seen the wood miser eat wood at my house a few times, but she doesn't really care for the business. Like, she supports me, but she doesn't love wood. Like, I talk about wood all the time, so you kind of have to separate that at times. Anyway, so she just launched her, we have 3 different businesses. She has her own little business, and she launched her second business, and I have my business. So she launched this ice cream cart. I take her to these different events. People, sometimes, majority of the time, they pay her to come to this event. She provides these handmade goods to these people, and then I have to bring her from the event, back home. So anytime she has me scheduled, I can't, go cut logs. So it's kind of like a scheduled process. You call me, tell me when you want to cut it, or I can tell you the available dates that I can cut your logs. We schedule it up and we cut them. So God bless you guys. Enough of my ramble. 23 people, 42 minutes. What else can we talk about? Let's see. Let's talk about some burrows maybe. I want to do at least 50 minutes, guys. Talk about the lathe. Man, I love the lathe. And another thing I love is I love making axe. And I didn't make this. This was one of those or Home Depot. I do love this axe though. It's the way to go. So I love turning with the lathe. I haven't done it in a few years. I do have a lathe. It's actually up in the attic. It kind of tells you how much I use it. So I like taking a piece of wood, a square piece of wood, throwing it on the augers or whatever they want to call them. I don't have proper names for any of the things that I do. Sometimes I talk about trees or cutting trees down, and he's like, what's a plunge cut? It's like, I don't know, that's just what I call it, or cut, whatever. But yeah, I love taking pieces of wood and turning them into circles, kind of cylinders. I think it's kind of cool. Like, I make a lot of handles and stuff. I don't know. Let's see. Get some stuff over here. Here's like a bat I made my son 4 years ago. So I just try to learn just handles. And there's all sorts of this is the tree of heaven. This is an invasive species in Oklahoma. It's a fast-growing species. I think any invasive species should be cut. If it was my choice, every Bradford pear in the state of Oklahoma would die. Okay? This is another fun fact. My dad hit a Bradford pear, and then he died 2 hours later. So anyway, Yeah, that's that. But yeah, I just don't really like the fact that you see these cedar trees encroaching on hardwood forest. I see cedar trees killing a walnut tree, and I see it a few times a year. I see a lot of Bradford pears in native forests that shouldn't be there. I do see the tree of heaven in many places. They shouldn't be there also. So yeah, and there's also a lot of it's just, I don't know, like, you see fields, I see fields throughout Edmond, Oklahoma, that are clear fields. The only tree that you see on these fields is, there's like thousands of Bradford pears, okay? So like, I know these plots of lands are gonna be scooped up. Someone's gonna pay $20 million for this, 40 or 60 or 100 or however many acres it is. They're gonna come and put all these spec houses on. So I hate driving down, kind of, it's like my home turf, and seeing the roof lines all look the same. Whenever I see a neighborhood and I see all the roof lines look the same, I can't value that property. I find it as a cheap ass property. I find it as a property that shouldn't be there, but I do understand why it's there, because it's affordable, okay? I would rather see a different structure there. I can't stand seeing neighborhoods, all the houses look the same, and every single roof line is the exact same. There has to be some type of customization when it comes to a neighborhood. So I hate seeing it. I've seen all these plots of land, like, if you reference Edmond, I've lived here for 30 years. Rose Creek, all this land, we used to go on these properties and hunt. We had access to all this land many years ago. Hunt ducks, geese, there used to be fields, there used to be lots and lots of ponds on this land, and it just used to be so fun to hunt. And now, like, all this land's developed around me. It's completely changed. So whenever I cut trees in my state for my own procurement, it's typically going to be at least 1 hour away from my home. So that's, there's lots of expansion around here. I will say there's been many times with this expansion, it's, came more trees. So people reach out to me. There's some pretty big businesses in the state that clear land, kind of that's what they do for a living. And there's many, I actually have some of the slabs in here from one of their trees. They had a tree that was massive. They knew it was a walnut tree. Well, they're in the business of clearing land. If this tree isn't removed by 3 o'clock, I'm gonna put it in my semi truck and it's gonna take it to the landfill and you're never gonna see it again. So like, that's kind of like the scenario. So like, if you don't make yourself available to save this tree at this particular time, you're gonna miss out on the tree, and the tree's gonna go bye-bye. And the land's gonna be clear, they're gonna complete their job, and they're gonna go to the next property. So I do like making myself available. I do not like scheduling wood appointments. That's something I do not like doing. Let's say next Thursday, somebody wants to schedule to, look at wood at 2 o'clock. Well, I don't schedule wood appointments in advance. I have never liked to do that because it ties me up to commit myself to somebody that might be a complete waste of my time. I have to be 100% honest with you guys. There's many times people will just waste your time. I'm not in the business of getting my time wasted or getting me, like, my schedule locked down. So like, my schedule is like open ahead of me. The only thing that I have on my schedule are commitments that I made to cut logs for people, because that's the business model. Like, my business model is to cut logs for people. I don't tie my schedule up to show somebody a wood piece that they might want to buy. You need to call me the day that you want to come, or you need to communicate with me like the day before. And be like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? Like, are you, like, what's going on? Like, I like to like communicate because I don't like to tie myself up, 3 or 4 days in advance to, sell some wood to people. Now I will say I have many customers, clients, however you want to go about it, that I have done wood business many times with, and let's say they want to come into town. Yes, they are a priority to me because I know that they want to buy wood and they're not going to waste my time. They have an idea of what I have. They're serious buyers. They're here to actually spend money, and I make my schedule accommodate them. There's been over a dozen times where people come through the state of Oklahoma because let's say they live in Tennessee and they're going to go visit somebody in Austin and they're coming through the state. They've been following me on Instagram for a few years and they've been looking forward to getting to look at my inventory. But guess what? They're not going to be here till 11 o'clock at night. That's perfect. I would love to meet you at 11 o'clock at night, and I'd be happy to meet you. So like, there's certain scenarios where it kind of makes sense to kind of schedule, but it's all about communication. I like to have like fluid communication. I do not like to rely on just like an instant messenger. People are like, is this available? Or hey, can I come look at wood? These people, sometimes like people don't value your time. Let's say someone says, hey, this has happened 100 times. I want to come look at wood at 3 o'clock, okay? So I get over here at 2:40. At 3:01, they're like, hey, I'm running a little late. You're telling me you're running late at 3 o'clock? You're supposed to be here at 3 o'clock. Yeah, it looks like, I don't say that at the time, that's just what I'm thinking in my mind. So it's like, if you were telling me that you're running late, the time that you're actually running late, 3 o'clock, it's like, you should have forecasted this to me like at 2:30 that you're running late. At 2:30, like, you should know, like, I'm not going to meet my appointment. I told this guy that I want to meet him at 3 o'clock. I'm not going to be there at 3 o'clock. I'll just tell him at 3 o'clock I'm running late. Well, guess what? So from 2:40 to 3 o'clock, you just wasted 20 minutes of my day. I could have been doing something else. Communication is extremely important with me. If you're going to be running late, like, if you tell me you're going to be here at 3:30 and you're at 3:35, that's completely fine. But if I get a text message, 3:35 that you're 30 minutes behind, you just wasted an hour of my day. I have a lack of respect for that particular individual because they didn't value my time. My time is extremely important. So communication goes a long way. So that's one of the reasons why I don't like to take it at face value whenever you're talking to people on instant messenger. My clients are going to be, cell phone numbers. I have text messages. They call me. They text me. Those are the clients that I'm going to, make a priority. If you're in my phone, I'll schedule a wood buyer appointment because I know it's a priority to you. You're a priority to me. You're in my phone, but just some random person that just wants to look at wood, and they, half the time, they flake out. It's like it just doesn't make sense for me to take people at face value whenever half the time people flake out. So I don't like people wasting my time. I think I've made it pretty clear. I might come off as rude. It's completely fine with me. I'm sorry that I might come off as rude, but I hate when people waste my time, and that's happened a lot in the wood business. So anyways, that's kind of the end of the show. We're looking at almost an hour. And that's pretty much it. But yeah, just a bunch of blocks, turning blocks. Just broke the case. But yeah, so 7-degree blade, 10-degree blade. My favorite blade to run on the Sawmill. 7 degrees is gonna be for pecan and hickory. 10-degree blade is gonna be for my walnut. And then as far as the maintenance goes, you need to make sure you grease the Sawmill. Make sure you have the spare parts to fix it if something happens. And then, make sure you don't, damage the Sawmill. There's many things that you can do with the Sawmill while you're cutting logs that you can damage it where you're going to make it where you're not going to be able to produce flat cuts. I've seen people, not with my machine, but I've seen people that say they're trying to pull their entire head back and they're not lifted up enough, and they run their their rollers. I just seen people do some major damage on sawmills, and just kind of knowing what's going on with them is extremely important. I will say if I had to make a recommendation to you, if you were to buy a sawmill, if you wanted to make your life a little easier, you get the self-adjust outriggers. So these outriggers never go above the bed, and you can adjust how much they go below the bed, so you never have to worry about, you know, your ground. You know, there's times where, let's just say it's relatively flat, but this, you know, outrigger is still popping up above the bed. It doesn't want to go any lower. Like all the other ones are fine, but this one's above the bed. Well, you have to dig a hole right there so that outrigger can go below. So that's kind of a pain in the butt. I do deal with that a lot. I highly recommend the self-adjust outriggers if you do desire to do the portable milling. And then if you have any questions, you know, like reach out to me, put them in the comments. You know, if you have any questions, I typically answer all the questions. I don't really have that many questions usually, so yeah. Put your comments, questions. You know, God bless you guys. Keep grinding, and you know, say hi. I have a question. Well, what's your question, dude? You know, what's up? I have a question. And then I guess the last ramble is going to be whenever I go into the woods, I have a little portable grill. I like to bring that portable grill with me. There's many times where I just dig a hole, put a a skillet down, or whatever you want to call it, you know, a grate, so you can, you know, cook your meat on whenever you're in the woods. But there's many times where I'm going in the woods for a few days, and I'm cutting walnut trees, don't have any service. You know, I am cooking lots of meat. I go to the gas station, you know, the closest down, like 30 minutes away, to get a few drinks throughout the, you know, situation. I might come in there 6 o'clock in the morning to get a breakfast burrito. I always like to go to the gas stations in these small towns at really early times in the morning, because there's going to be individuals in these towns, and let's say they're landowners, okay, and they're in these gas stations and they're drinking coffee, and they're next to their buddies or their friends, and these are older individuals, going to be past 50 and 60 years old, okay, sometimes 40, 45, 50, you know, whatever. You know, older individuals, they own lots of land, and they're in these gas stations. So I make it a priority to always go to the gas station at early hours in these small towns, because that's where you form relationships. These people, they see you come in, you have your I don't have a Sawmill shirt on right now, but they see a Sawmill shirt, and maybe pops a question in their mind. Let's say you might even, you know, just arrived into town, and you have the Sawmill in your truck. Well, that's a billboard. People, whenever I stop at a gas station, Sawmill's in tow, at least 50% of the time, maybe 75% of the time, somebody's going to talk about the Sawmill. They're like, that's pretty cool, you got a wood miser, blah, 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 blah. They'll ask you questions. Man, I really have this one log I've been trying to get cut, and it might land you a job. So kind of make yourself available, you know, kind of get out in the community, you know, take your Sawmill out, try to talk to different people. If you, trying to get more business. Let's see if this question came in, but I'm gonna end this. I got things to do, and I'm also, so outside of there's kind of a, small stream, but there's like 20 people here. I'll say this, outside of the wood miser and like the cutting and the selling wood, you know, I trade Bitcoin every day. So like, you know, like shorting Bitcoin, longing Bitcoin. I'm currently in a leverage trade now. I need to look into it. I don't have any stop loss in place. I think it's like $178 trade. So like if I lost 178, like it wouldn't be that big of a deal. I don't want that to happen. I like to reduce that risk to maybe like $60. You know, just continue to add to, you know, your leverage trading account. And then obviously, like, this is the last thing. Anytime I sell a piece of walnut, and this has been happening for many years, anytime I sell walnut, I convert the dollar into Bitcoin. I think that's extremely important to me. The reason I see that is because in 2020, this cost me $40,000 cash. It cost me $60,000 right now. So the dollar doesn't go as far as it does today as it used to. So it's continuously losing value. They continuously print money. We continue to have to pay higher prices for all these goods. So that's the reason it kind of like, anytime I make money, I like to, you know, buy Bitcoin. I don't like necessarily buying it at these particular prices, but you know, I still do and have like to do that. So that's kind of my spiel on that. I think it's very important to have multiple streams of income. When it comes to like being an entrepreneur, I have been an entrepreneur for 15 years. So just relying on, if you desire to buy a wood miser and you think it's going to completely solely pay for your livelihood, you might be mistaken. There's going to be a lot of hard work. There might be times where you don't make any money with the wood miser. I have been fortunate and blessed to manage my money properly over the many years, that I don't necessarily have to pull like a weekly check to kind of survive life. So I think it's very important. If you don't have the money to buy a wood miser, you probably shouldn't buy one. And if you do desire to buy a wood miser and you want to finance it, make sure you have a plan to produce the money to pay for your situation, and then also have a backup plan to kind of make happen if your original plan doesn't come in to fruition. So I think it's very important to plan your goals versus just like, oh, I'm going to buy a wood miser and start cutting woods for people in the state of Ohio. Get a plan. Where your log's going to come from. Where you're going to store the wood miser. Where's your wood going to go? Is your wood going to sit for 6 months to a year before you put it into a vacuum kiln? Are you going to air dry the entire situation? How are you going to target getting access to landowners or different people that want you to perform this service? Are you going to learn how you're going to do that? How are you going to manage the logs? How are you going to lift the logs up? How are you going to lift the slabs up? Like, there's many things. This is all hands-on. There's stacks behind you in fresh cut material. You'll be ready to go in like a year or so. I just cut. They're perfectly done stacks, and that all is done 100% by hand. I love doing it, but it is a time-consuming thing. So if you plan to get a wood miser, make sure you have a plan to execute so you can achieve your goals. And always remember, just because you have a plan doesn't mean it's going to it might not go as you planned it to go. So make sure you have a plan B, and make sure you have the ability to make your plan happen. If you have a current job right now and you've always desired to work for yourself, I would say instead of quitting your job and trying to start your own business, maybe you should start your own business today. Continue with your job, continue to bring that cash flow in, figure out how you can actually do this idea that you have, and start doing it. Okay, do that for a few weeks. That can be done. So in a few weeks, you can come up with a plan. How you're going to start your own business. You finally have a business plan. You can use ChatGPT. It can formulate a business plan in 13 seconds. Okay, get your business plan. Kind of get an idea of how you're going to do your business. If it's a sawmill, if it's yarn, if it's dog sitting, or whatever it is, and then take one day off a week. You have vacation time. You have PTO or whatever. Take a day off because you have a scheduled job or a scheduled situation for your new business. Perform the task, see how it goes. Do you like the process? Did you enjoy doing that outside of your normal job? If you did, you should continue to do it. Try to land a couple of those. Start doing your jobs on the weekends whenever you don't have to actually go into your 9 to 5. Try to get some type of sense, some type of calibrate exactly. I potentially see in 6 months I can have enough work that could completely replace my income. Okay, well, try to continue to go through that. Try to make that happen. You might need to buy a bigger power washer to achieve your goals. Well, the 7 jobs you've done in the past 2 months pays for a new power washer. We'll use all the money you just made on your side gig on your brand new power washer to get the job done. And then you'll see that throughout your job, throughout your business, that you're going to need to buy another asset. And those assets can either be financed. You can finance those assets. You're going to have interest that's going to work against you on a monthly basis. I'm not really a firm believer in credit cards. We do use the credit card every month. It's automatically taken from our account every month. The only reason we do that is because you get like points and stuff. But yeah, so like if you do desire to like finance new assets for your business, just make sure you have a plan to like, and make sure you fully understand like what these might cost you, what pressures these might put on you, you know, in the future, the months ahead. So having a plan is really important. You know, I will say this, I didn't necessarily have a plan when I bought my wood miser, okay? I just knew that I was cutting wood for over 5 years. I'd say probably a little over 4 years. I was paying somebody. I would take logs to somebody and they would cut them for me. And I did that hundreds of times. I probably spent over $20,000 in milling fees. I paid someone $20,000 to mill my logs before I, you know, had the sense to buy my own sawmill. Okay, so like that was like, it was an indication. I had indicators in my mind. It's like, I'm spending all this money to get these logs cut. Like, why don't I put the tool in my own tool bag so I don't have to, you know, have this cost that's going down the drain that you're never gonna see again. It's just like renting a house or renting an apartment. You have an apartment, you have a house, you've had a house for 10 years, 5 years, and every single month you're throwing $1,500, $2,000, or whatever it is, so you can live at this particular property. It goes down the drain. You do it again the next month. Your other money that you have outside of that, you know, expense is paying for other bills. You might save a little bit of money, but you're never going to recoup that money through down the drain. Period. Okay? If you own the property, that note you were trying to pay on a monthly basis, assuming you bought properly, you're eventually going to recoup all that money back versus throwing it down the drain. So I would argue real estate is what builds wealth. And then I will also say that there's multiple streams of income that's going to be involved to like really generate like, you know, a certain wealth that like I desire to generate. I want to have 4 or 5 different businesses. So those are that's my ramble for business, and you know, the wood miser and my little wood miser business, sawmill business. If you're getting logs, let me cut them. God bless you guys, and hope you enjoy your night. Let's go.